The Chuckster is calling for a bold performance from those Rockets, and he's calling it a must-win. Stephen A., Game 1, Monday. Is it a must-win?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And the reason I say that is because I completely agree with Charles Barkley on this point. Normally, it's not applicable. Normally, for teams that are legitimate championship contenders, it's not that important. Just you know what, if you lose a game at home, you can overcome it. And I'm not trying to imply that Houston wouldn't be able to overcome it per se. But understand one of the reasons why the Max Kellermans of the world had them as favorites, why somebody like me recognized that this could go 7 games, why we appreciated so much what we were seeing from the Houston Rockets this year. Because they were so formidable, we said, okay, they have the #1 seed in the West, which means home court advantage. That's what you're relying upon. It's to hold home serve and to ensure that if all else fails, if you protect your own home turf, you'll definitively have a Game 7 on your home court. Well, if you lose one of these first 2 games in Houston, you haven't protected home serve. Now the Golden State Warriors have home court advantage, and you've got to go to the Oracle to take them out. And the way I view this series, and I've come to view this series, is that I think that Golden State may protect its home serve, so it's imperative that the Houston Rockets do the same. I think if they were to lose, particularly Game 1, and to automatically get stripped of whatever psychological, not advantage per se, but whatever psychological strength they may have at their disposal, if that gets stripped from them Game 1, it's problematic. It's even more problematic than if it happened in Game 2. Because Game 2, you could have taken it for granted. You might have been feeling yourself. You might have dropped the ball a little bit. But Game 1, knowing what this means, knowing you worked for this all year long, knowing how desperately you wanted home court advantage for the first time in the postseason to meet Golden State this year, and you go out there and you lose Game 1, I don't think that bodes well for you the rest of this series if you're the Houston Rockets. And that's why I believe Game 1 is pivotal for them even more so than Game 2.
I could see a 30 for 30 years from now looking back at this series and interviewing Chris Paul and James Harden, Mike D'Antoni after we lost Game 1. It didn't look good, but you know what? We never panicked. They could lose Game 1 and still win the series. Look, sports attracts interesting thinkers because of questions like this, I think. It's, Bill James, Nate Silver. There are a lot of interesting thinkers and writers attracted to sports because of it provides fodder to think about in interesting ways. So, for example, Game 1, who is the pressure on? You want home court. Every team ever wants home court. But the pressure is also on that team because you got to defend home court. It's almost paradoxical. Wait, we play all year for this, now we have it, and we got to win the game? Like, this is a must-win Game 1? But if they win Game 1, I understand your psychologically debilitating point, Stephen A., and there's some validity there. But if they win Game 1 and lose Game 2, they've also lost home court. So now the pressure is on the Rockets against one of the greatest teams ever to win 2 games in a row, or it's like a disaster. And the idea that there is more psychological pressure if they lose Game 1, I agree with that. It makes it worse, but not a must-win, because the idea that they can't go forward 1-1 to Golden State, now they have to win a game on the road, just as Golden State had to win a game on the road. That's not the end of the world. And I don't know that if they lose Game 1, they lose Game 2. I could see them losing Game 1 and winning Game 2. And so they've now lost home court, and that's a bad thing. It's not a good thing. Now they have to win a game on the road, and I think they're capable of doing that. The point is not, is it bad for Houston to lose? Bad to lose any game. Is it bad for Houston to lose home court? Of course, they've worked all season for it. But is it the end of the road if they do, which is really what we're saying when we say must win? You know, we don't mean it literally. It's hyperbolic. We're trying to capture a sense like, wow, this is almost impossible to win if you lose this game. No, I don't think they're in that place if they lose Game 1.
Well, listen, I'm just saying, listen. I understand why you would feel that way because you have them winning this series, and it makes total sense. So it's not about a disagreement per se, but you have to also understand the psychological perspective that I'm trying to bring to the equation. I usually leave those things to you, but I'll take the bull by the horn for this particular discussion. When I look at the Golden State Warriors, if they had the #1 seed, Max, I would have an entirely different mentality because they would walk into this Western Conference Final Series with a degree of pressure on them that they may not be accustomed to having. In this particular situation, I want to say that they're playing with house money, but what I will say is that there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the Houston Rockets. There's a whole bunch of people in H-Town that have been bloviating about what this team is capable of. Ultimately, hope has transcended into expectation. And because those expectations are there, you know what the old saying is about expectation. It breaks pipes. We know what time it is in that regard. So if you've got the number one seed because it's home court advantage and you think this is your time, even more important than game 2, game 1 is pivotal to come out and send the message that here we are. You can recover from a game 2 loss because that's just balling and it happens. But game 1, from a psychological perspective, can have a residual impact that's far more significant than any of us imagine, particularly going against an experienced champion.
Stephen A.